am so grateful in this season for you, for all of your support. And just for that matter, I want to offer an additional 35% almost to joining the Reach and Frequency program this December start. Okay, what we do in this program is that we teach people not only the fundamental skill set to get started in the field, but also hands-on experience in a DSP. We sprinkled some LinkedIn and resume workshop on the way. We have guest speakers, we have mock interviews. I put you in contact with my network that is hiring. So if you're interested in finding out how to find a job or land into your dream job in digital advertising, specifically programmatic, go to reachandfrequency.online/Black Friday. I am thankful for you. Send your friends, bring your friends, tell them to pull up. We're having a party. There's still time for the December program to start. Have a wonderful time.
There's always a better way to do what you're doing right now. So be grateful. Now they're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to do, right? And I was like, no, programmatic is where my heart is. Amen. Welcome to another episode of the Programmatic Digest podcast. We have my very, very good friend on as a guest today, Carlos. How are you doing today, Carlos?
Doing very well. Thank you, Hélène.
I am very excited to have you on. Carlos and I know each other we go way back. Let's just say it like this, okay? We go way back. I'm very honored to have you as a guest today because we're going to talk about programmatic experiment testing during your optimization phase. We're going to talk about maybe mentorship, community, and also like the importance of understanding other channels besides just programmatic or creative and programmatic and how it can pretty much benefit you as a programmatic ninja. But before we get into those topics, Carlos, how about you take a minute or two to just talk to us about who you are and really highlight your journey from where you were to now where you are.
Okay, thank you, Hélène. My name is Carlos Villanueva. I was born in Panama, so I'm not from the U.S., but I have spent most of my life living in Miami, Florida. I kind of have like an interesting journey into programmatic. And I started in the retail sector. I did retail stores, worked as an assistant manager for a few years before actually getting into anything remotely near digital marketing.
Uh-huh.
The other things, once I kind of like left the retail sector, I started working for the Miami Herald here in Miami, a newspaper. And that was kind of like my first stepping stone into media in general. I spent a couple of years on the publishing side, not doing anything digital per se, but just working with the actual newspaper.
Nice.
But then I was drawn into the online side, the Herald.com, and I started to kind of like apply for positions, and I finally got one after a couple of years and started working. My first digital position was working in as a real estate producer, kind of working in the real estate page, and managing some of the widgets that you will see when you go into the real estate homepage.
Nice, that's
from
really
there. From there, I spent a couple more years working in that position, in that role. And then I was handpicked to kind of work in as an ad trafficker for the ad trafficking team. And that was about maybe 2006. And from there on,
that goes way back.
I go way back. I'm aging.
Way back.
Aging myself here. I did from 2006 maybe to about 2015, just did ad operations and ad trafficking. My first role after the ad trafficking was in the programmatic space, maybe around 2015, that I started working with an agency, and I kind of started working in that sector, being a media buyer. So I'll be honest, I struggled a little bit that first year. So it was even though I had spent so many years in ad trafficking, it was not the same
Mhm.
it was not the same deal. And kind of like that first year was thought to myself, wow, did I really make the right decision?
Oh, yeah,
And
that's real.
but then little by little started picking up. I said year two, then I started like building little by little, my understanding of programmatic media. And then, by the time I left that agency, I was like, I come from like the bottom, I would say, all the way to the top. I was kind of like the person people were going to for questions and for advice on how to run campaigns. So, and just recently, as of last year, started working for a new agency, Butler and Till in Rochester, New York, and they specialize in activation of pharma campaigns. So I'm in digital pharma right now, and just working with my current agency in a senior role as a programmatic specialist.
That is super dope. I love asking this question because everybody has a different journey. But it's also maybe someone like at least one person is going to listen to your story and be like, oh man, this is me right now. Or, oh, I feel this way too. Like, so I just need to keep going, keep at it. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's why I'm very excited to talk to you about, programmatic, the best practices of optimization, why you should experiment, when and why not to experiment. So before we get into that topic, tell me in your own words, if you had to define your day-to-day to a 5-year-old, wait, your daughter is 4, right?
She's 4.
Okay. If you had to explain to your daughter what you do in the day-to-day, how would you explain to her?
Day to day. So there's always like the eBay example that people throw out there, but like I think that will be a little bit too complex for her. But like I'll say it this way. Let's say we're at the mall and she loves Claire's, the store Claire's that has like all this jewelry and earrings and so she loves going to Claire's, and I was explaining to her, but let's say in the programmatic role, I'm in charge of flyers, passing out flyers in the mall.
Okay.
So I'll take a stack of flyers that have maybe a coupon or something, and I'll go around the mall and I'll start handing out to everybody in the mall. So to create like that traffic that goes back to Claire's, to create people visiting the store. So I would say that. So basically, that's in the big picture, that's what we're doing. Like I'm the person passing out the flyers on the DSP, and the flyer is the video impression or like other static image or what have you. And then I'm just trying to bring people into the store and shop. And then like if I wanted to take it a little bit deeper, like an optimization would be, instead of passing out the flyer to maybe senior folks, like I'll start passing out the flyer to teenage girls and getting more teenage girls to start coming.
That's good. That's pretty good. Wow, that's a great explanation. I've never heard that one, and I think that one is the best top 5 in my opinion, because I heard quite a few, but I like the fact that you really took account of your audience, which is your daughter, and you really talked to her in her language. So definitely this is one of the good ones. So with that said, when it comes to targeting, talk to us maybe about like the importance of experimenting when you come to programmatic activation, right? So we know that most of the data for programmatic trader, a buyer, whether senior or junior level, is managing a campaign. Sometimes it's multi 6-7-figure campaign. Sometimes it's multiple campaign for that one brand. Sometimes it's multiple channels within those campaigns for that one brand. So can you just talk to us about like best practices when you are in a situation where you have a larger account to manage and then you have multiple campaigns? How do you prioritize optimization? What are your maybe top 3 best practices? Like, okay, when I look at this campaign, this is what I do. Boom, boom, boom.
I don't think I have like a strategic way of just saying like when I'm looking this campaign, I do this step 1, step 2, step
Gotcha.
3. I kind of like just I wonder a lot, and once I get a campaign into a good place, I start to wonder. I wonder if I do this, what will happen? And then I kind of I kind of pick my pockets, pick my spaces where an experiment wouldn't do that much harm, and experiment that way. One of the recent experiments that I've been running is with will be kind of like targeting criteria instead of targeting to all OS. I've been targeting mostly to iOS. And it's something that's been on my mind since the iOS 14 releases for like a couple of years ago, where we started seeing people people actually started excluding iOS inventory and then going into the Android inventory. But then I started doing some research on my own. For me, on the pharma side, a lot of HCPs, so a lot of healthcare workers use iOS. So going that way didn't make sense to me. So I started like thinking, well, what about if I strictly target iOS? And I started seeing some great results just targeting iOS inventory. And I started seeing, not only was I getting great results, but I was seeing the CPMs actually come down a little bit because so many people have moved into Android inventory that the Android CPMs started going up. And then because and because I went into iOS, I started like decreasing my CPM. So that was like, that's kind of like how I come into my optimization. I started like keep up in the industry, keep up with the trends, and start like to think like, I wonder what will happen if I pull this lever on my campaign.
Wow, yo, okay. So let's unpack what you just said, because you dropped so many gems, right? I was trying to like highlight, if you were a book, I was trying to highlight everything you said, right? All right. So I want to highlight the fact that you said, what if I tried this? What would happen, right? As long as it's a semi-safe decision, what would happen? So can you even break it down one more steps for my people out there, including me? How do you determine that safe decision? Like, okay, I want to experiment this. If that doesn't jack up everything, like what are some things that you can look at from a get-go? And I know each campaigns are unique, but is there one thing you can share? Like, oh, if I want to experiment, I'll make sure at least it doesn't to do this. See what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think my approach is to kind of like look at like the daily patterns of your campaign, how much you're spending a day, what kind of like conversions you're getting, and cost per conversion, that kind of stuff. And then see the day of my test, how does that affect my campaign? If you need to stop the test early, by all means stop the test early. But do you start getting some data, that daily data, and then that will be an indication whether you're like moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. So that's kind of like how I gauge it.
That's good.
How I gauge my experiments.
Yeah, that's really good, because I think it's always like, I remember as a trader, and even now when we're consulting with clients, when they ask me like, when do you know to stop this experiment, or when do you know to start the experiment? I always have to go back and look at things. And you're right. I think once you understand the trends of your campaign, then you'll be able to assess fairly easily, like this is going to really switch. But like sometimes when it does, have a really high change or consequence or really low consequence, it just means that the experiment maybe need more time, or it's just not working. So I appreciate what you just shared, especially with the example of the iOS. So how did you measure though the conversion? What was the result from what was the conversion that you were tracking?
In our case, in digital pharma, we're measuring conversions. For us, it's like a user coming to the page and kind of like staying on the page and reading different tabs within the web page and getting more information. It's more like an awareness play that we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we measured how long does that user stay on site? Like, do they stay 15 seconds on the site? Do they stay 30 seconds? And we're always optimizing for the users to stay longest on the site. Because eventually, what the end game is kind of to get that user to talk to the doctor about a particular drug and say, I heard about this drug and like what do you think about it? So that's kind of like the end result that we're trying to do, and we have seen a correlation that like the users that spend more time on the page are more likely to go back to their physicians and kind of talk to them about that drug. So we have a way to measure that time on site. So what we're doing is seeing if we're getting those users spending that particular time on the site, and then if we are, then we keep optimizing towards that targeting criteria. That's what we saw. And then what I saw on my experiment that we were getting when we were kind of like targeting all iOSs, then we were operating systems, we were getting more conversions when we were targeting strictly to iOS in our feed.
Wow, that's interesting. And do you think it's because the audience on iOS have increased too? Like more people are iPhone users versus Androids?
So the stats that I've seen worldly in the world, there's more Android users than iOS users. But in the US, actually flips. In the US, there's slightly more iOS users than Android users.
Oh, interesting.
But then if you even look at it in a microscope, the HCPs really love the iOS operating system. So it was kind of like clear for me if the healthcare workers are already so close to the iOS devices, it just makes sense to target them there.
Wow, that is so dope. So if you're listening and you thought about excluding iOS because of lack of measurement, then this is your answer. Call Carlos for consulting purposes. I love that. Okay. All right. So give us another example of where you maybe had to experiment and then you were hoping for something, but you got something totally different. So give us like, let's flip the coin, and see, because I want people to realize that experiments can go either way. But the biggest thing about experimenting in your optimization or in your campaign management is the fact that it'll tell you a story you might need at that moment. So if it's not working, then you know not to do that, right? So can you share a time where you experimented and you're like, oh, shucks, that does not work?
Oh yeah, like a recent one, the ones that I have in my head right now is it's another campaign, another digital pharma campaign that I was running. Okay. And I started thinking about the campaign, started wondering like, what about if I shut down the campaign on the weekends, maybe I don't get enough conversions happening on the weekends because doctor offices are closed on weekends. And I started like having that hypothesis in my head. I went ahead and didn't get the results I wanted. It turns out that like doctors, doesn't matter if it's the weekends or weekday, they're always like looking for looking for information. So it's like it's a 24 hours, 7 days a week type of thing. So it doesn't really matter. So I was hoping to see more conversions happening because I was targeting my budget Monday through Friday, but I didn't see that happen. But it was an easy way. I just reverted back to the settings I had before, and I was able to get back on track.
Yeah.
But I think doing those experiments are important because the wondering, you stop wondering, you stop thinking maybe there was something else I could have done. Like if you go through each channel, I kind of like test out like the different options that you have, though you know the answer, well, that doesn't work. And I think that's important to like, even though experiments or tests that you do having that not work, it's okay too. It's a win, because you're understanding more about how the sector works.
Wow, that's good. That's good. And did you have to explain to the client what happened?
No, I kind of choose a pocket. I kind of don't optimize all. I don't do a blanket test on everything. So it's kind of like
Okay.
one particular
Uh,
campaign with kind of like a smaller budget, and I'm gonna make that my test. And then yeah, you do have to explain.
mhm,
Conversions went down, but
mhm.
like that's always the nature of like any campaign. It's not a projection that goes up, 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 up.
Yeah,
It's always, it has like peak and valleys going up and down, up and down.
I like that.
So
I like that. That's dope.
so once I reversed my targeting criteria, then like I was able to get it back on track.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example because, again, we think that because programmatic advertising is just automated, that we should be able to see all of this right at once, right? But you do have to
Yeah.
experiment. I mean, we do have better measurement capabilities, but like we still have to experiment. And sometimes the experiment goes wrong, but sometimes it goes right. But regardless, you still have the ability to say, actually, this is not working, so we're not going to do this, or this is working really well, so we continue testing.
Hi, did you know that at Hélène Parker Consulting, we now offer an accelerator program where we attract, recruit, and train future marketers? And their training include a 6 weeks program where they cover programmatic landscape, important industry trends, the differences between targeting placement and targeting mix, and their best practices, including optimization and reporting hacks. And they're able to set up, manage, and monitor a campaign, a demo campaign in the trade desk, everything including audience selection, inventory optimization, SPO, creative upload, brand safety, you name it. They're able to do it at the end of the 6 weeks program. So if you are part of the 90% of employers struggling to find a skilled candidate today and not willing to spend $14,900 on a bad hire, according to Zipia, give us a call. Let's discuss which one of our 5 to 10 juniors available every month is the perfect fit for your team. Clients who have hired our juniors have shared that we were able to help them save 1 to 2 months onboarding with those juniors. Give us a call right now and let's discuss the solution with you.
All right. So you're in a senior position in your career, in your journey. And so I'd love to hear about how do you continue educating junior level teams, maybe that are under you or in your overall team. How important is it to continue educating yourself? Because I literally heard you say something very specific about iPhone users in the US against iPhone users and Android users globally, which is something a campaign cannot really tell you. So you have to do a certain level of educating outside of your day-to-day or outside of those campaigns inside. So talk to me about like some of that. Like what does it take for you to get educated, but also to continue sharing that knowledge with like junior level, team?
I think for me, everybody has like a different approach, but I know the importance of staying current with the trends that are happening. It's very important to listen to podcasts like yours or courses like yours, a reach and frequency course.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as an associate or mid-level or senior level, just go ahead and sign up for as many courses as you can. Mm-hmm. Don't just rely on the courses being offered you that are being offered by your agency or your particular DSP, because they will have different perspectives. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important. There's a lot of information out there in LinkedIn. Just like follow as many media vendors as possible. They tend to offer like a lot of webinars and sign up for as many webinars that you see. There's conference out there. There's things that happen locally in your city. And find groups of people that just want to have a conversation about programmatic and what they're seeing in their industry, mm-hmm. and what are the trends and what is happening on their campaigns, what is happening with new vendors, So I think that's how I try to keep up, because it's hard to keep up with everything that's happening at once. But like that's my attempt. And I also like kind of like have this little hack hack that like whenever there's a presentation or something like that, I'll record it and then I'll play it back later. And surprisingly, I understand way better like the second time around, or maybe like a couple of weeks later or a month later, I'll understand more. I'll get more of the concept of what they were saying than just the first time. So if you take a course or like join a webinar and like and don't just like put it away and then come back to it, like go back to it. If there's something interesting about it, like pull it back. You know, that's like presentations that I go back about fraud and media, and like I'll pull them back and just rewatch them again, just for the fun of it.
Yeah, no, that's actually really such an important advice, because it's almost like when you said that, it made me think about when I just watch cartoons with my daughter, like Disney's movies. I've watched these movies for years. It's Disney, okay? It's like classic. But then I was just sitting down and I noticed how Ariel was calling. So we watched Ariel, the Little Mermaid, in French because we speak French to her. And I remember I had never noticed how she was calling flounder a total different name, right? In French, she calls flounder polochon, which is nothing. It's just a name. It's just a name. It's not even like flounder is the name of the fish, flounder, but flounder in French is totally different from polochon. So I had never noticed that. And I've been watching The Little Mermaid for years. So this is just a crazy example to illustrate what Carlos just said. Sometimes you have to rewatch or reread or QA yourself, redo that same steps, because you're going to see something that is different and notice something that is different. And there's so many things about even Mulan, even like all the classic, literally we sit down and we watch some of them and I'm like, oh, I never knew that this was there before. And so it's really important to go back and review your own work. And I think I want to applaud you for saying this, because I think a lot of us are set it and forget it type of people when it comes to learning, educating ourselves, and we never go back on it. So I'm going to challenge y'all, just like Carlos is challenging y'all, to really go back and pull some actionable insight from the content you just watched or rewatching, and continue rewatching. And there's nothing wrong. Like once a year, I make a point to reread. I used to reread The Alchemist once a year, every year. I've read it maybe 5 times, and I remember always saying something different. You know what? Now that I said that out loud, I have not read it in the last 2 years. And I realized it's because of my daughter. I'm going to blame her. I'm going to blame her on this one. I read other books, but for some reason, I haven't read that one. So by the end of this year, I'm going to read The Alchemist again. But you guys, I really, really love that story. And even like The Little Women, which is a classic. I used to read it around Christmas time for some reason. I don't know. It's kind of a sad story if you think about it, but I like reading it around Christmas because it was a classic. And I would always learn something new about Joe, the main character, about Amy, the youngest siblings, etc. So I really appreciate you saying that. With that said, let's talk about the community. Let's talk about mentorship, because you've joined the Programmatic Meetup community maybe late last year. And the value you've brought into the community has been so exponential. Like literally, I had Carlos post community calls when I couldn't make it and have like, Carlos, just talk about optimization. You're so good at it. So talk to us about like your experience in the community and like mentorship. How important is that for you?
Oh, well, I'll talk about the community first. I think it's very important just to find that community, a group of people that just want to talk about programmatic campaigns. It's very hard to do. It's not rarely it's not available out there.
No.
So the fact that you created something like this for this community to happen, like I applaud you for that, and thank you for having us and hosting us. But just like, you know, like for people like me that like have a passion for digital media, and it's just a great place to just talk shop about like what's going on out there. And like I've met wonderful people in this community and had reached out to several of the people in the community and individually one-on-one and say like, I have a question about this, and they being able to kind of like set aside some time on the day and just walk me through like their thoughts, their processes. Like I have equally gained as much as like maybe like the people have gained for me. So it's a great experience to have. And I want to also like talk about the mentorship. Mentorship, like I'm huge in mentorship. I have the pleasure that in my current agency, Butler Field, we have a mentoring program that like once in a quarter, I'll meet up with people that are outside my ecosystem. Maybe they're managers in another department, and we get to talk about like questions that I have about moving up within the company, about like trends or like some of the things that I should be preparing myself for, like just to continue on this journey. So I believe that there's mentoring for everybody, even if you're just like out of college and haven't had any experience in programmatic or digital media. I think like that's the time to start like a mentorship. And it'll help out at all levels, at the mid levels, at the senior levels, whatever level you're in.
That's really good. That's really, really good. Because like, okay, so let me ask you this. If somebody's listening and they're like, oh, dang, my company doesn't have this mentorship program, what would you want them to know or do to go seek their own mentor? Like what are like, maybe share, if I was in this position, I didn't have a mentorship on my job, these are how I would look for a mentor for myself.
Definitely a good place will be to start is LinkedIn and just start reading, start to educate yourself on the things that are happening on the industry, the articles, the podcasts, the webinars, all these free resources. And then once you have more specific questions, then start to reach out to people that maybe you heard in a podcast, maybe they hosted a webinar, and you could reach out to them. A lot of times they just give their information at the end of the presentation, and just reach out to them and say like, I'm interested in this topic, I'm interested in a mentorship, and they could either point you in the right direction. So a lot of times those just like take you under their wing and like and say, let's go. That's like, what are your thoughts? I'll give you half an hour on a Zoom call. So I think it's just easier nowadays to find those mentorship connections through social media, through LinkedIn, and just stay on top of your game, stay always learning, and reach out to those people that are giving the presentations, that are being the speakers, that they're featured in a podcast, or like they're writing articles about industry.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Mentorship is always, it's very, very important, because like that person, and like you said, it's easier now because people want to help you. Like most people that I've reached out to about, oh, I know somebody that's looking for a mentor, you'll be perfect for them, or vice versa. They've always jumped on the opportunity to help. Like it's really important, especially if you let them know, like it's a small commitment of once a month, twice a month, something like that, once a quarter. I think it's really important. And actually, since Carlos mentioned his mentorship program from his company, I actually gave that example to a handful of my other agency clients, and they started implementing that. I was like, well, somebody in my community, this is how it does. That's just exactly what they did. And they're like, this is great. We're going to implement that. So thank you for sharing, because now other people are going to benefit from that. Because you had, you opened up that day and you shared about the mentorship program. And kudos to Butler and Till too for implementing something like that. I think it's so important to have a path, like a vision of your journey where you're trying to go, even though it looks unclear at the moment or feels unclear. At least you have people that have been through this journey to look up to, or at least you want to be on their journey to look up to. So I really, really want to thank you too for sharing that. And I guess I'll flip the coin here real quick and ask about, the importance of understanding other channels, because I know you briefly mentioned it at the beginning, but why should a trader, a buyer really understand how other channels work to be really good at their own channel, like, running a DSP? Like what could be the benefits from understanding how to run search, or have run search, or have ran in Facebook or LinkedIn and so forth?
I think before I do that, I did want to say that about one last thing about mentorship.
Yeah.
One of the things like when I reach out to people, I always try to bring in something to the table.
Ooh,
Whether
that's
like
good. That's a good
so
point.
it's kind of like a two-way
Yeah.
relationship. Not only like, okay, give me knowledge, but kind of like I could bring something to say to the table as well if I'm talking to somebody that's like that is working in paid social. Like, hey, I saw this article on paid social about the new changes in Facebook. Let me just pass it to you. Do you might find
Oh,
it
that's
useful?
nice. Okay.
Or like, so I'll try to connect the dots and like things that I'm looking through in my feed. For example, if I see an interesting article, I'm thinking, oh, Hélène might like this,
Yeah,
like
yep.
for example, and passing it on, passing that information. So I think it's a good habit to kind of like develop that sense of like seeing what information has out there and matching that to like the particular people that you work with. Like they might be interested in this, and they may be interested on that, or webinar or something like that. So
Yeah.
I try to do that so it's not only like me gaining knowledge, but I'll try to bring something to the table as well.
Yeah, that's good. It's a give or take type of relationship. I love that. And sometimes it's as easy as like what you said is when you're reading an article and you're thinking about that person, share it. Like, oh, I came across this. I think you'll find it interesting. Boom, leave it at that. I think that's really great. That's dope. Thank you for sharing.
And about other channels, like I have a lot of experience in paid social. So I was kind of fortunate in my last agency that we ran programmatic campaigns and paid social campaigns at the same time. I got to learn like a lot of the paid social side, and like I just think it's really important to see how everything interconnects. I got to see like the importance of creative that happens in paid social. Like I got to run my own experiments. Like if I were to put an emoji on my primary text, like what would happen, and like if I were to take a static image that the client gave me and make it animated, just using like the own platforms tools, so I like to like I think it's definitely beneficial to kind of like learn about like other platforms, because eventually like somebody doesn't just want to run programmatic, they want to run search, they want to run email, they want to run paid social. So you need to understand how they all connect to each other and how do you read those reports? Like how do you determine if paid social is having a good campaign, and what can you extrapolate from that information for your own campaign? So I think that's definitely like the benefits I see of learning other channels like paid social and search.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point, because like I don't even know how many times I was in a media meeting, and search said, oh well, we went ahead and excluded I don't know, these negative keywords, right? And then I thought about it and I was like, well, I'm targeting these people in my campaign. So maybe that's why you're getting a lot of that traffic that is not converting. So maybe I should exclude that. And or like you said, in social, like they'll test creatively a little bit better than in display, and then you'll get some of that insight and optimize on our end, like, oh, those people are more likely to follow Instagram accounts on like personal fitness of moms with toddlers. I don't know, like the fitness instructor is a mom and she has a younger kid, and then so that's really relatable, and that's type of data segments we can target in our DSPs. So I think it's really important to, and going back to everything you just said, right? Experimenting, looking for, looking for new strategies, even on the mentorship aspect. If you have a mentor that is in programmatic advertising, and then you have a mentor that is, in social or search, like being able to have that perspective is very important, because sometimes we get very tunnel focused in programmatic.
Break the silos.
Yeah, we get very siloed, and because we have so much capabilities, and sometimes we have so many honestly, I think we have so many platforms to manage at once sometimes. Like, don't want to throw shade at the dark side search, but search is like, you know, search is Google Ads and then Microsoft, right? But sometimes, like for instance, you mentioned you use multiple DSP. I remember at Accelerate Digital, where we work together, we use Simplify, we use DV360. At some point, we have Adobe. At some point, we had something else. It's like a lot, right? And then we had Facebook campaigns that we were managing at some point. So we have like 5 to 6, 7 DSPs to manage at all time for one or multiple campaigns sometimes. So I think it's really important to step out and really learn from others. And sometimes, and I remember doing that with all of my positions, like agencies or your work may not have something officially implemented, but if you know that you have a search buyer that is managing the same brand as you are in programmatic, reach out to them, be like, hey, can we check in next week? I want to learn about your campaigns. What are you doing? What is working for you and what not's working, so that I can see how I can complement it in programmatic or vice versa. And I swear, like, the amount of information you'll get out from that meeting is really going to set you up, like, because you're going to come out with so much inspiration, tactics, ideas. You're going to be able to really experiment, like Carlos is telling you to do. I hope you do it.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. We're so focused in our own channels and the work within this little silos. Reach out to people in the content team and
content as well. Don't have to be
SEO, email, like pay search, pay social, and find out what they're doing, because a lot of things could apply to your campaigns, and you just want to get that insight from them and apply it to your own campaign.
Yeah, I love that, especially on the creative aspect. Like, sometimes I know that creative team don't hear anything until like the very last minute, especially in the strategy and like in the strategy process, right? They only hear this is what you should do. But being able to talk to creative, like, hey, according to my past data, these type of audience have engaged the highest, or these sizes have had the highest performance, or the highest results. Giving that information back to creative people can be very, very valuable to them, because now they'll know, like, oh, so this is a larger image. I get to fill in more. I get to have more flexibility in how the creative is going to look, right? Because it's higher impact. And versus like the mobile, maybe the mobile should be like a GIF or HTML, where you flip multiple frames instead of stacking a lot of writings, because mobiles are really small. So like, I always remember even asking those meetings with those creative people and letting them know, like, hey, I don't know if you heard, but the best performing sets that you created for my campaign was this one, and I think because of this. Or, hey, this creative did not perform really well, but it could have been because of the audience or the seasonality, not so much about the creative. So being able to really encourage. And then also another skill set that you develop is like, it's going to help you when it's time for you to be a manager and manage people, because now you're not afraid of asking and reaching out to these people and delegating and really pulling their creative thinking into the mix, really challenging them. What can you tell me about this? Like, oh, well, let's start here, start from the top to the bottom. So thank you so much for dropping by. Want to be respectful of your time. Before you hop off though, I'd love it if you can share like one fun fact about yourself, which I think I know which one, but
one fact. Okay. Like, I have like many interests besides programmatic. I'm also interested in music. I used to have a band before. It's like I play guitar, and I have a large collection of like instruments and guitar pedals. I think I kind of collect guitar pedals now. So I just got one recently. I have it right here. Like,
oh, what is that?
as you can see it, it's a guitar pedal made by Jack White, and he's like and it just recently came out. It just takes your sound like an octave higher and an octave down, and just creates like this like full sound that like when you play the guitar, like it sounds like you're Jack White. So I'm really into collecting guitar pedals. The other thing that another fun fact, I'm also a yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and I have passion for yoga and for working with people. I have worked with people like that have like in many different populations. People have Parkinson's disease. I have done classes for children with special needs.
Wow.
And also, and I even ran a program, a class for prenatal yoga. And I think I was probably like the only male to ever do that in Florida, like, or maybe the United States.
That is the first Latino to do that.
Yes.
That's awesome. That is so cool. I had no idea about the guitar. I knew about the yoga part, but the guitar is really cool. I knew you were into music because I remember when you came to Raleigh, everybody went to bed and he went out to see a band at like what? It was 11. Everybody was already done with the activities. And I was like, Carlos, you went out and then you woke up for yoga the next morning? Power to you.
Yes, very important. Very important.
You know, I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I think it's a great reminder that, you know, we tend to be so consumed by work and we forget that it's a whole world out there that is important, and that our current job does not define us as a person. It's not even part of our identity. It may define some skills, but it's definitely like, what makes your heart happy? If you're good at your job, that's so great, right? But what else can you do outside of like this? And I think you're a perfect example. And I know for a fact you're going to inspire somebody to close their computer or turn off this podcast and go out and get after that one thing that they wanted to do. So, so thank you so much for stopping by, and actually leave us with a word of wisdom, right? What would Carlos say or do if you had to give yourself one advice to your junior self or to your freshman self, something you wish you knew then that you knew now, what would that be?
Well, we already talked about mentorship, which is very important. We talked about creating new creative experiences, get out a step out away from your computer and do something else creatively. But I think one thing I would say is ask questions. Be that person that's always asking questions and have those discussions in the meetings. Because from my experience, I was very kind of like timid and afraid to ask those questions earlier in my career, but like now I don't hesitate to ask those questions, because what I see is that like 90% of the people are wondering the same thing and nobody's raising their hand asking their questions. So be brave and be the person like out there, like in your meetings and your communications, asking those key questions.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Carlos. This was so helpful. If anybody wants to keep in touch with you, how would they do that?
Oh, yeah. Please reach out to me in LinkedIn, Carlos Villanueva. You'll see that you'll find my picture, like work for Butler until. So I think you'll have my information, show notes as well. So
we'll have all of Carlos' information into the show notes and in the description of the YouTube video if you're watching this. And if you want to talk to Carlos more often, he's in the community, the Programmatic Meetup. So check it out as well. But thank you so much, Carlos, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Hélène, for having me. It's been great.